The future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds Podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about.
All right, we are here with author of County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, and former Graham County Sheriff, founder of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, oathkeeper, and vocal constitutional defender, Sheriff Richard Mack. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's indeed a pleasure and honor.
Absolutely. So it definitely gives me hope that guys like yourself are out there emphasizing the importance of oath keeping and acting as an officer of peace and protection. I think these are words that are important. When one becomes an officer, they're given a great deal of power, and with that comes a great deal of responsibility. And the vast majority of officers, if they maintained that mentality of being protectors, constitutional defenders, and peacekeepers, man, I think we'd have a pretty beautiful society. Would you agree?
Yeah, in fact, I guarantee you that the rates of police abuse would diminish greatly, if not entirely disappear, because the police officer would be viewing himself as a peace officer and a protector of liberty instead of somebody that has to beat somebody into compliance, and that his main goal is making arrests and forcing people to behave the way we think they should. So yes, absolutely. We need to change that entire paradigm that officers have been brainwashed into at police academies across this country.
Absolutely. Before we get into it, I want to touch on this pandemic craziness a little bit. I mean, we're seeing things like the LA mayor recently announced the new guidelines for basically encouraging people and rewarding them to report businesses that violate orders. This may be changing now, but that's one thing. And then I watched a video of a woman being put in handcuffs for letting her children play at the park and refusing to leave. So this stuff is just crazy to me. And so I guess my question to you is, as someone who's heavily involved in law enforcement, and let me preface this with, I know there's obviously people dying out there. I don't discount that. I worry that politically, from a governmental standpoint, this is going to be potentially used to expand governmental oversight beyond the hopes of we the people. Do you yourself have any concerns that situations like these may ever be used to instigate some kind of police state type scenario, or justify the implications of some kind of more aggressive surveillance or public monitoring infrastructure? Is that at all a real possibility or concern in your estimation? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, we know that the governments, especially the federal government, would never spy on law-abiding citizens. We know that they would never monitor or tape conversations without probable cause or due process. I'm sorry, but the government has been going way too far for the past 50 years, and it just keeps getting worse every year. We had the Patriot Act, and they promised us that the Patriot Act would only be used in foreign terroristic cases. And then for the first 2 years, the only place it got used was domestically, on domestic issues. And so they keep stealing this power. The National Defense Authorization Act was where they could put people in prison until the crisis is over. And now we have this crisis, and they say, oh, well, we're only going to arrest people for stupid little petty things until this crisis is over. My God, how many crises are they going to have? And it seems like there's one every year. They used 9/11 attacks to really go after the constitutional rights of Americans. They used the H1N1 flu, the swine flu, and then there was the bird flu, and then it's just, and gun violence. Oh my gosh! Every time there's a shooting, see, we told you we have to get rid of guns. And isn't it amazing that Hitler and Stalin and Lenin and Castro and other communist dictators throughout the 20th century used the same tactics. We will tell people that we'll make them safer if they'll just do what we say, if they'll just comply, if they'll just lock themselves down. And Hitler was very successful at this. And now we have mayors and governors and others in our country doing the same tactics, and they think we shouldn't be concerned. Yeah.
Right. My biggest concern is with the role that government plays, and their purpose, right? It's supposed to be for the people, right?
Right.
And by the people. That's, we're a democratic republic. We have representatives that are elected to, legislate in a manner that is consistent with the geographical areas and the constituents that they were elected by.
Right.
But I think that less and less that seems to happen. It becomes more of a almost a parenting role, right?
Oh, of course.
And that's the fear, because with the pandemic, you think, okay, so this virus is killing people. Yes, that's tragic, but it calls the question of what really should the government be controlling? Should someone have the right to risk their life for a greater purpose, for any reason? So for instance, people go skydiving. It's highly dangerous. There are different activities that people engage in where, there's a high risk of death. And
Smoking,
yet,
for example.
right, the government doesn't, step in there. They let people contract, right? But all of a sudden we have a virus that's killing people, and they say, oh, wait, hold on. You can't choose if you get to expose yourself to the virus for the sake of being with a loved one who's passing away, right? We have people dying in hospitals. And I think, the tragic part is the number of people who are dying in these hospitals from this virus, and they're alone. And it's not by choice. They're separated from their families. So I want to know your thoughts on that, given your background and your experience in law enforcement. And then there's a next topic I am so excited to cover with you. So first, let's touch on that.
Well, you said a mouthful there, but you actually covered some points that I always like to cover. And one is, I want to make this very clear to everyone. I am concerned about the coronavirus, and I think it's real, and I think it's deadly. I do not believe that we have received the truth about the numbers. And numerous doctors across the country, across the world, have disputed each other's findings, and especially of Dr. Fauci. And I can name the doctors: Dr. Shiva, Dr. Stephen Smith, Dr. Buttar. They have all claimed that Fauci is not just wrong, but he's lying. And when you look at the numbers, it very much looks suspicious that Fauci is not at arm's length on this whole issue, and that he hasn't been forthcoming in some of this. Be that as it may, at the beginning, they were telling all of us to take vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin C. Now they're not saying anything about that. They're just saying, stay home. And the brainwashing in Arizona on the freeway is, stay home, stay healthy, as if staying in home is going to make you healthy.
Absolutely.
And I find that ridiculous. But this is where I really am, and yes, I'll say it again, I am worried and very concerned about anybody dying of the coronavirus. I certainly don't want it to be me or my wife, and my wife's mother is 90 years old, and I would feel horrible if something happened to her. She's a sweet lady. But this is where I'm at. And my mother-in-law will say the same thing. Some of us in the history of our country have actually put liberty above safety and health. And I'm one that agrees with that. I agree with what Patrick Henry said. Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? I'm not willing to destroy America for the coronavirus. I'm not willing to destroy everything that made America great, that made us the most prosperous and free nation in world history, I'm not willing to flush it down the toilet so I can feel safer and feel healthier. And not only that, you alluded to this. And I think this all boils down to that we have a pandemic of corruption within our government, locally, statewide, and federally. It's just too damn corrupt for me to trust what they're doing. And don't they have to comply with the Constitution? How is it that an order from a governor that is not even a law becomes supreme to the First Amendment protection of freedom of religion?
Yes.
I thought we could agree on one principle that we would hold sacred in this country, because it was one of the reasons why so many people came to America, and that was for religious liberty. And yet now we have, because of this coronavirus, has driven us all insane, that we actually have police officers and a sheriff in Florida arresting a minister,
Yes.
a pastor, for conducting church service, and in Mississippi, citing in the pastor and even the parishioners, congregation are being cited because they're not practicing the proper rules and laws and orders of social distancing. And I find that absolutely astonishing, alarming, and pathetic that we could do such a thing in the country that's supposed to be for justice and liberty for all. That's not. And for anybody, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent here and I'm not getting off. For anybody to suggest that your constitutional rights, your God-given rights, your natural rights only apply when we don't have a crisis. And they only apply in times of smooth sailing. If everything's going great and everybody's healthy and there's no dangers and there's no virus going around and there's no flu bug and there's no measles and AIDS or whatever, I don't care. It's only going to be that your rights apply when everything is fine and we're all healthy. Well, that's then we're not free. We're just guinea pigs under the control of people who say when we have a crisis, and even if they have to make one up, and oh yeah, government would never do that. Well, we already know they're fabricating numbers on this one, and so I don't know. I'd have to say that my liberty is all the time, and that we will fight together. And you can reason with me, Governor. You can reason with me, and you can persuade me, and you can educate me, and you can ask me to join the community in wearing a mask or keeping our hands washed or staying home for a week or so. But if I don't, you don't have any right or authority to arrest me or take me to jail, especially when you're releasing real criminals and then putting people in like Shelley Luther, who opened up her hair salon. Insane.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's so scary to me because freedom of religion, you know, like you said, very well said, that is one of the main, I mean, that is the main reason, you know, we were basically kicked out of England and sent to America to go settle. And back at that time, you know, it was Puritans that were settling in America. And then you have, you know, fast forward to the founding fathers, and, you know, I know that you've read the Federalist Papers, and you look at what they intended to happen and what government was supposed to be, and it seems like that's been stripped away. My question is, when, you know, let's take, for example, gay marriage, okay? The reason right now that is legal based on, you know, what the courts have decided is that they say, okay, someone should have the freedom to choose. It's two consenting individuals. You know, there's no one else being harmed. Okay. So if you use that same logic and you apply it to right now what's happening with churches being shut down. I mean, the scenario where people go to church, okay, let's say they're not social distancing.
Right.
Each of those people are choosing to take that risk. They're choosing it intelligently. They're choosing to, be in that environment. And if they were to get sick from the virus, that would be through choice. Further, the implication of religion, that for many people, no matter what religion someone prescribes to, it deals with afterlife in many religious beliefs. And so this time here on earth is very, very short. And if, those groups are stripped away of that right to do here on earth what matters, and makes a difference in their afterlife, it's stripping that away. So if they die, they're dying with that being stripped away. And to me, that's stripping away the very life. You're existing rather than really living. So it's a huge concern. And that brings us, go ahead.
I agree. And when you say talking about stripping rights away, in my books that are available at cspoa.org, I actually in two or three different of my books, I bring up Rosa Parks, because on December 1st, 1955, in Montgomery, Alabama, she was arrested, thrown off a bus, and arrested by peace officers who have sworn an oath to the Constitution, who knew about the principles of equality that our entire government was based on. Right there, out of, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, why didn't we enforce that? Why didn't cops understand that? And I think we're having the same thing today. We don't have cops that understand the principles for which our government was established, and that they're supposed to be enforcing those principles and living those principles. And so let's compare Rosa Parks to Shelley Luther.
Right.
She owns a business. She employs several hairstylists, and they're all concerned about paying their bills, and they're concerned about feeding their children, and they're concerned about living their dream of having a business and having a job and being productive. And government now gets to destroy all of that because we might get the coronavirus, and the percentage. And I've worked this out with other people, and I've heard very credible scientists and engineers and mathematicians put all this together. And the consensus is there's about a 0.2 to 0.4% chance. That means 99.8% of the time you're not going to get it, and you're not going to die of it. And we're tearing down our entire economy, and now 33 million people are out of work, and we have the suicide rate going up, and we have the unemployment rate going up, and we have depression going up, and we have domestic violence going up, and nobody worries about the side effects of the coronavirus shutdown. And so I want people to really examine this. We have so many people that think Rosa Parks was a hero, and yet I think it's very worthwhile to note that a white woman got 7 days in jail from a black judge, and that was Shelley Luther, because he said she was selfish. Dear judge, being selfish is not a crime. Okay, we might not like it, and she was very obstinate and stubborn. That's not a crime either. And we need to get back to the basics, and we need to get back to the fundamental principles that America was founded upon. And then I will gladly, willingly help fight this thing as best we can, while we keep our jobs, while we help and maybe quarantine the sick among us and the elderly perhaps. But I'm not willing to throw the country away. And maybe another case in point, I think, didn't one of you mention We don't make cigarettes against the law because a million people
Right.
die of cigarette smoking every year, heart disease, lung cancer, and so on. That kills about 1 million Americans every year.
Exactly.
We don't shut everything down. We don't even make cigarettes against the law. Okay? And how about 33,000 Americans killed in traffic accidents? We don't shut down the car industry. We don't get rid of cars. Oh, and how about this statistic? This is also true. Most traffic accidents happen within 5 miles of your home.
Correct. Yep.
So, well, then let's not let people drive 5 miles from their home. You must park your car 5 miles away and then ride a bike home. And we also increase getting in shape. So I'm surprised that these Democrat dictators in America, the governors that have done all these dictatorial rules, why don't they do that with, and they would save about, we wouldn't save all of them, 33,000, but we would save what, a good portion, maybe 25,000 lives every year.
Right.
Come on. Stupid is stupid. And it doesn't matter if it's during the coronavirus crisis or any other crisis, so I think we need to look at history and look at what a comparison study of why we're doing this for the coronavirus and we don't do it for anything else, and what is really going on here. And what seems to be going on is government officials are closing America, destroying the Constitution, and suspending liberty. And I'm not willing to do any of those three.
I completely, agree with you on all of those points. Fantastic points. I would even go so far as to argue that Shelley Luther's decision to, go back to work, it was not a selfish decision, and this is why. Her clients are aware of what's going on. They have a choice of sitting in that chair.
Yeah.
So if it's selfish, it's about her. Well, it takes two people to set up an appointment to have hair done. And it should be at the decision of people whether or not they want to go sit in a chair and get their hair done and expose themselves to that risk or not, right?
That's just too simple. You see, that would be, that's just.
Well, and there's no money in that. So
I wanted to ask you real quick before we continue. In your circle of friends and your fellow brothers in blue, so to speak, who are currently active, what's the general contention amongst them? How are they responding to all of this, as far as you can tell?
Good question. Most of them are getting to where they're tired of being asked to be thugs. As Sheriff Nichols in Maine said to his governor, he said, "We're not going to make this a police state. We're not going to act like Nazis, and we're going to enforce the Constitution." Everybody needs to say that, but even patrol officers and other police are out there saying, "No, we're tired of being asked to do this. This is stupid, and we don't treat people like this. Don't ask us to do this anymore." Yeah, those are my hero peace officers and my hero sheriffs.
Well, and that kind of brings us to our next topic, actually, and it preludes into it really nicely. I want to talk a bit about constitutional values, governmental structure, and that interplay. You already touched on it a little bit, but specifically, there was a case that you were involved with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that case?
My Supreme Court case?
Yes. Why don't we start with, from the beginning, at the United States District Court level for the District of Arizona. If you recall, kind of just the backdrop of what happened at the district level.
Well, people might need to know a little bit better background first, and that is, I was the first sheriff in American history to file a lawsuit against the federal government, take it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and win. Mm-hmm. And in that case, you can see it, you can Google it online, Mack versus U.S. or Mack v. U.S. or Prince, P-R-I-N-T-Z. That was the other sheriff that did this with me. I filed, and then about 4 weeks later, he filed, and we both ended up at the Supreme Court. But 5 other sheriffs also did this nationwide. Out of 3,100 sheriffs, 7 did this. And it should have been everybody, because it was the Brady Bill, and the Brady Bill was a gun control scheme that literally forced the sheriffs of this country to enforce a federal law. And it threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. So, and I'm not making that up. I say that I just pass over it like, yeah, that happened all the time. That was also the first time in American history where a federal law commandeering sheriffs for federal bidding threatened to arrest them if they don't go along. Again, absolutely astonishing, and just another sign of the corruption of Washington, D.C. So we filed suit and went to the district court, and that was the only place where we, the sheriff plaintiffs, testified. And man, oh man, I've testified in court hundreds of times, maybe even thousands. In the course of the 20-year career I had, it seems like it was every other week that I was testifying in one court or another. But the attorney for the federal government said something amazing. And she started to testify instead of asking me questions. She started to testify. Obviously, she was on orders from people on high in Washington, D.C. to get this information out and the public and part of the record. And she goes, all of a sudden she's asking me questions, and all of a sudden she goes, well, Your Honor, in the first 4 months of the implementation of the Brady Bill background checks, we have prevented 250,000 felons from getting access to guns in this country. And
how is that substantiated? Right?
Oh, it was a farce.
Yeah.
First of all, there was only 4 felons in the entire first year that were arrested pursuant to Brady Bill background checks. 4. All of the others that she was quoting were driver's license violations, hunting license violations, fishing license violations, and minor stuff like that. Warrants that were out there for not paying a traffic ticket, just really silly stuff like that.
Really?
But they were not felons.
Out of curiosity, I just want to ask you really quickly, when she said that statement, was there an objection by your attorney?
Well, of course, that's what I thought. I was looking at my attorney and I'm going, what are you doing, Dave? Come on, why are you letting her talk? But he did. He let her go on. And I'm so glad he did, because the judge took care of it.
Good.
And these words are in my book, The Magic of Gun Control. I did a chapter on Judge John Roll. And what a great man. He was actually murdered at the Safeway parking lot in Tucson back in January of 2011. Wow. Maybe it was 2008. Anyway, maybe it was January 8, 2011. And when Gabby Giffords was shot, and the assassination attempt on her life. And anyway, Judge John Roll was killed that day. And it was a very sad day for me, because he really had a huge impact on my life. And at this point in the courtroom, he stopped and he pointed his finger at the attorney for the federal government. He said, "Counselor, do not try to pretend in my courtroom that somehow your statistical analysis somehow equates with constitutionality." Now, you being a lawyer, you've got to love that statement from Judge Roll.
Absolutely. The judges, from what I've experienced, and I've litigated against the FTC in federal court, and various cases, I have not yet had a judge that did not really understand and digest what was going on. Now this is in Arizona. I did have a case in Nevada. It was a bit different. I won't go into that. But here the judges are very, very good. And it does give me hope, because attorneys do need to be put in their place oftentimes, so.
Well, I don't have a lot of hope for judges. I've seen too many judges who put an Amish farmer. I was a consultant for this Amish farmer, and Danny C. Reeves, a federal judge in Lexington, gave this guy 6 years in prison because he would not apologize for making a salve out of chickweed. And I didn't even know what that was until I started investigating this case for him. But it's a very innocuous herb, and he made this out of beeswax and rosemary and chickweed, and it's supposed to help with abrasions and little tiny tumors on your skin and stuff. Anyway, he got 6 years because the judge said he would not apologize. He was obstinate. He didn't register with the FDA, you know. So yeah, and so he just got out like 3 days ago, and he's home now with his family. But he spent 3 years in prison, and the only reason he got out now was because of the coronavirus. And they let people go who really didn't need to be in prison, and so he was one that was released. I've seen too many judges like that. They think that big chair they sit on in courtroom is a throne. They think that robe is a royal, regal cape of a king, and that their gavel is their king's staff. And I really will tell you, I've had it with federal judges. I've had it with judges across this country, like the judge that gave a week to Shelley. And I'm telling you, it's just, you know, and I admit there might be a lot better judges out there, because I have to say, but even my case, you know what happened on my case? It was a 5-4 split. Well, guess what? It was all politically based. The 5 Republicans sided with me, and the 4 Democrats sided with the Clinton administration.
Oh.
And that bothers me. That's politics. That's not constitutional law.
Absolutely not.
And so I don't have a lot of faith in the people running our justice system today. And but maybe I'm being too judgmental because I've seen the bad side too often. But it just doesn't seem like we follow the Constitution anymore. It just doesn't seem like we base any of these decisions on true principles that the founding fathers talked about, as you mentioned, in the Federalist Papers and in the Constitution itself. And this one principle that I don't see happening in government very much, and it's this: the purpose of all government in America we see not in the Constitution itself, even though the preamble gives some philosophical things, but it's in the Declaration of Independence, that where it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. That means every officer in the judicial branch, every officer in the legislative branch, every officer in the executive branch, all 3 branches, we have the same job, same assignment: uphold, defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution, and thus protecting the God-given rights of every citizen. Oh, if we only had public officials who really believe that.
Well, and it calls into question, what is the paramount and the foundation of the United States? You know, in the Declaration of Independence, it says every person that is part of the United States, every American has unalienable rights. Everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My question is, where does a stay-at-home order to prevent someone from getting a virus foster any of those ideals?
Well, they would say we're protecting everybody's life, whether you like it or not. Don't
Well,
you understand? We're smarter than you, and we know what's best for you, and we know this is horrible, but it's for your own good, and damn it, we just have to do it.
and Machiavelli says it best when, you know, he says that the ends must justify the means, right?
Oh,
You look at the means being used to prevent this virus, and yes, it might be, you know, bringing down that bell curve, but this is the problem. How much worldwide hunger is it causing? How many people are going to starve to death? Because in third world countries where they're not equipped for something like this, they're having real struggles with putting food on the table. You know, this is already an issue. How
and if
many,
you care about that in America, you're selfish and you go to jail.
right? Right. Exactly.
Oh,
I
God.
think, yeah, there's definitely some valid criticisms in regards to those different organizations. You know, same with ATF, IRS, FDA, and Sheriff Mack. How about the CIA? I mean, the more I learn about this organization, and this is something I think I've heard you briefly mention, the level of unchecked power this organization has is insane. Whether it's MK Ultra or behavioral modification programs or things like the Phoenix program in Vietnam, it blows my mind. I mean, it's like the CIA is literally out of control with the shit that they get away with. Pardon my French. Is it not? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have agencies after agencies after agencies here that are part of this deep state corruption, and the CIA has been doing it for decades. And uh, even Maxine Waters accused the CIA of dealing drugs in the Southern California area to poverty-stricken uh, areas and neighborhoods. And yet she got away with that. If I were to say that publicly, man, I'd be branded and all this, they'd try to tar and feather me and run me out of town. But the thing of it is, what if Maxine Waters is really telling the truth about that and she knows and has inside information? Yet we spend $90 billion a year to stop this horrible drug trafficking, and then we find out that the CIA has been a part of it. And so, yeah, how are we supposed to trust any of this? And yet, I'll give you an easy, simple one. March of 2015, front page of USA Today. I hardly consider that a right-wing conspiratorial periodical, okay? And it has a big article on the front page about how the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, agents of that federal agency to stop drug abuse throughout the world, the agents that were assigned to Bogota, Colombia, and neighboring towns were all having sex parties. And guess who was providing the prostitutes? The cartels of Colombia, the very entities that we're supposed to be fighting and stopping from proliferating drugs throughout the world. We, United States agents, are accepting bribes from them, so in the form of prostitutes. So what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened. None of them were charged. None of them were fired. None of them were disciplined. The first female director of the DEA resigned. They picked another one and they went right on their merry way. So with that kind of corruption, how do we, the people, trust any of that? But now we trust them to tell us the truth about the coronavirus and how we should actually take care of ourselves. And now airlines say that you must wear a mask on the entire trip. So let's say if I flew from Phoenix to Honolulu, for 6 hours, I would have to have a breathing mask apparatus on, which means what am I breathing for those 6 hours? I'm hardly getting any oxygen, which could be extremely detrimental to my health, because the buildup of me releasing carbon from my body with every breath I take, that builds up and I'm starting to breathe that in instead of fresh oxygenated air. So even I know that much, and I'm not scientific at all. And so I know that keeping that on for that long cannot be safe.
Sure, I agree. I mean, I have to be law abiding. I'm an attorney. We take an oath to uphold the laws regardless of, what we think about them, unless they're challenged, right? I challenge anyone to wear an N95 mask and to go jog just a block down the street. I have 2 children and, they stay at home when we go to the store just to be respectful. It's very hard to breathe in those, very difficult. Yeah. And the other question that I have, for the airlines is, okay, you're mandating that your passengers wear these masks. Are you paying for these masks and providing them? If not, they're going to see some lawsuits. I guarantee it. Another issue is with, I believe it was Frontier Airline. They now offer social distancing where you can pay $39 to have an empty seat in the middle.
Yeah.
So you can pay $39 for your health, but yet we're going to go ahead and mandate you wear a mask at your own cost, right? They don't want to bear, and they're in the process of asking the government for money, then getting the money. So, it's where do you draw the line, right? Who has to bear that burden? A big corporation or an everyday civilian that, doesn't have maybe the money or the time to go buy a mask, especially if they're not on the shelves like they were when this virus first, took off and started infecting people in the U.S. So I did want to circle back to the case because we got off on a good topic and I didn't want to cut it short because it was just,
We didn't come. Well, let me tell you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but I know time is getting away from us. But this is the quote from Justice Scalia, who wrote the decision that everybody should memorize and take it and get a copy of this decision. I turned it into a little pamphlet that fits in your front pocket that you can read in 12 minutes. I'm serious. You can read this in 12 minutes. And the biggest quote from this decision to me was this: "But the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions." Did everybody hear that? The Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. It divides power among sovereigns and among branches of government precisely so that we may resist the temptation, are you ready for this? To concentrate power in one location as an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. End quote. That's right from the Mack Prince case. Folks, it's everything that's happening right now, the crisis of the day. And is the Constitution supposed to protect us from that or not? Well, the Founding Fathers say yes, I say yes, and the Supreme Court said yes. So why do we have law enforcement and sheriffs and other people in this country who believe they don't have to do it? Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And I'll do you one better. I will actually put that document that you have on my website, if you'd like, my law firm site.
That is the most powerful $3 document you could ever find. And in fact, you can get 5 of them for $10. So $2 each, and pass them out. Make sure you read it first, and everybody can join CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association. Everybody can become a member. The sheriff only reports to you. These peace officers, these peace officers work for you and you alone. For God's sakes, find out what they're supposed to be doing. Let them know how you feel about liberty and that you don't want them to do crazy enforcement on these coronavirus orders. And let's get back to some sanity, to common sense, and to the supreme law of the land.
Absolutely. Very well said. Yes, I mean, the court case, so ultimately it did get appealed to the Supreme Court, and you did win on that case, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so can you talk about, the Supreme Court decision? I know that, and we haven't discussed this, but there was another case that happened about a month prior to yours. And that was the only case out of the 7 cases that you were talking about where the court ruled in opposition to, the other cases that were at the other district courts. So it goes on to the Supreme Court, and, what does the court end up deciding?
Well, the Supreme Court, as I said earlier, they sided with all of us except for the one in Texas. And after we went to the Supreme Court, we all won.
So did they overthrow the entire law, or did
no.
The subsection?
No, severability.
Yep.
Yeah. So they only got rid of the part that applied to us sheriffs. So they didn't get rid of the background check. They only got rid of that we didn't have to do the background check, but it went 10 times further than that. It said the federal government can't tell the states or any of their officers to do anything, that the states are not subject to federal direction. And don't you wish that some of the states, especially governors and state legislatures and sheriffs, understood that the federal government is not our boss and they can't tell us what to do?
Well, absolutely. Wow. I mean, in essence, they were asking you as, a sheriff, and for the state, for that county to do these actions that are costing time, money, resources, and they're not willing to foot the bill, but yet they're willing to, mandate how it's done and what
Correct.
it's done, right?
Correct. And if they had offered me money, I still wouldn't have done it. It was against the Constitution. But if they had come to me, like I had a contract with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I had to sign off on it. So how is it that they got the authority somehow to just tell me how to do my job and make me pay for it on a federal law? So you're right. We had to foot the bill on the whole thing, the time and the money and all the process and the political heat. So I said no. And another astonishing thing that I'm sure as an attorney you'll think this is pretty big. They threatened to arrest us. So we actually got an injunction against the Clinton administration from arresting me while we were in court.
Wow.
Tell me that's not something. I had to order protection from the Clinton administration. And aside from that, I was the only person in history to sue Bill Clinton on a non-sexual matter.
You have to laugh at that one a little bit.
I hope so. That's my best line.
I swear I did not have sexual relations.
Yes, I did not. But yeah, I sued the Clintons and lived to tell about it. And it was just a miraculous case. A small town sheriff from Safford, Arizona, takes a case all the way to the Supreme Court and wins. Wow. So the older I get and the more I look back at it, the more I cannot believe that I actually did it. I had a good wife that totally supported me on it. And it was quite the amazing case. Another quote from the case was this. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. That's Federalist Paper 51. Scalia takes us through a very powerful history lesson as to why the 10th Amendment still counts. And state sovereignty really is the ultimate solution to what the federal government is doing concerning overreach. And the sheriff is the ultimate check and balance on anyone violating the Constitution or victimizing his citizens within his jurisdiction. And that's exactly how it should be. We should be making it difficult for tyrants and dictators to do anything in America. And we do that county by county, one sheriff at a time.
Well, it gives me hope that there are sheriffs out there like you because, I've experienced both sides of the coin. I've litigated DUI cases and different criminal cases, and sometimes you see an overbearing violation, of constitutional rights. It happens on a daily basis. And, sometimes I think that when they hand down laws like this one, where, you go into a state of emergency so that the executive branch can state, okay, this is what you need to do, and the states have to implement, that's the workaround around it. And that's something that can be very scary. So I wish that every sheriff out there who's listening could kind of take your angle on it and realize that is, how it's supposed to be. That's the mentality that I believe that our law enforcement should have. So I commend you for that.
Well, thanks. And I hope that they'll just study it for themselves and find out for themselves that this is all true and that it's our duty to protect the people, the right of the people in our community, whether it's a threat from a gangs of LA or if it's the threat from gangs in Washington, D.C. or gangs from the state capitol. It's all the same. We have to protect people from all crimes and all criminals and all enemies.
Exactly. So now about to wrap everything up. I would like to ask, if you have any final words to talk about, and then I want to give our viewers, citations to the different items we've discussed so they can, kind of go and pull for themselves the case that you just covered. So do you have any final thoughts?
I would only end that liberty is the most precious gift that we have, except for life itself. And government is supposed to protect life, liberty, and our right to own property. And they don't get to say, well, in order to protect life, we have to destroy your liberty and your property rights. That was never meant to be, and they have to protect them all. And they don't get to destroy America for the coronavirus or any other disease or any other natural disaster. Freedom all the time, all my rights all the time, no exceptions ever. And never again will I support the shutting down and the destruction of America and our economy and increase unemployment exponentially to keep us safe. I'm sorry. That cannot be. That's not America. That's not freedom. And that's not what our Constitution allows or says. Let's get back to the Constitution and we will find the solutions.
Very well said.
Amen.
So for our listeners, the court case that Sheriff Richard Mack was speaking about at the United States District Court level is Mack v. U.S. 856 Federal Supplement 1372. The Supreme Court case is Prince, that's Printz, v. United States 521 U.S. 898, and that case was in 1997.
All right.
So, Sheriff, how can people find out more about you, what you're all about, and what kind of...
Okay. Just everybody go to CSPOA, stands for Constitutional Sheriffs Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. Become a member, donate, buy the books, especially that little tiny book that is so inexpensive, The Victory for State Sovereignty. You can read all this case for yourself.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And you have an open invitation anytime you want to come back and chat it up.
Yeah, there's so much that I could see us wanting to cover with you. It's the tip of the iceberg, so we'd love to have you on, maybe 6 months down the road once things have progressed even more potentially. So
if you enjoyed this episode of Philosophical Minds podcast and feel so inclined, please do leave us a 5-star review. Those definitely do help, and it's greatly appreciated.